What inspired me to become a writer was my older brother, who, when we were kids, we had, this is like back in the early 90s, we had a little camcorder and we would make, I say we, he would write and direct his own little films. But after a while of abusing our friend's goodwill, he kind of got tired of directing. And the reason why he got tired of it was that it was so much work. He felt he had to sort of organize everything and control everything. And he really got into writing, because when it's on the page, it's just you and the words, and you can have more precise control over your vision that way. The unique challenges of writing for a video game is that you need to be able to take what I call a sort of mathematical view of story. So if you look at a movie is basically 2 hours, and somebody learns something about themselves in those 2 hours, and that's a movie. It's a straight line. But the minute you want someone to, if you put a player into a game, we say that they're like an actor who doesn't know their lines. So you need to find a way to psychoanalyze that player and make them behave in a way that's going to give them a good experience. And what's different, particularly between games and other media, is that there is no specific way of doing that. You need to have a kind of empathy for your audience and an understanding of the geometry of storytelling, and to sort of combine those two and resolve that equation with every game. Your creative vision can only take you so far. Eventually, you need to be able to explain your methods to people and have what we call an objective discussion instead of a subjective discussion about stories. So when you first start out, you should absolutely play everything, read everything, watch everything, and try and build as much experience by osmosis as possible. Just let stuff percolate and drip into your brain. But eventually, you need to be able to analyze the things that you're passionate about, or the material you've seen and enjoyed, and say, well, why does it work? And once you can start to answer that question, you become a very powerful creative. I think that it is useful and valuable to bring games into libraries, because ultimately all any creative medium is trying to do is to communicate something about the human experience. Even if it's something for kids or it's something very highbrow for adults, ultimately you need to have a little piece of human truth communicated through some form of narrative. There's no reason to keep those things separate, because they're trying to achieve the same thing. My favourite game is a game from, I think, 1996. It came out in the UK, called Metal Gear Solid. And the reason why I love that game is that it was very story heavy, which was to my taste, not to everybody's taste, but it was to mine. And it was the first game where I felt that I was learning something playing the game, because it had done very deep research into global politics, and it was about the 97 Starter Accord and nuclear weapons, and I found that to feel, it made me feel smart playing it. If I could peer back through time and tell my young self something about writing, it would be to not think that your creativity alone is enough. And that's kind of a bleak answer to give people, but it's the truth. The thing that makes you strong is structure. You can have the biggest muscles in the world, but if you don't have a skeleton, you're jelly. So that was what I needed to learn. It took me a long time to learn it. A project like Storysmash is incredibly useful because, okay, look, the year that Titanic grossed $1 billion at the movies, everybody made a big fuss. 4 or 5 games that year grossed $1 billion and continue to do so. This is a massive, massive industry that thrives on the creativity of young people coming into it. It makes absolutely no sense to me that we wouldn't try and support that. Something like Storysmash is the bedrock of the growth of that industry. When I was still at school, I had a passion for literature, and I tried writing in that form. But when I discovered games, to me it was an awakening. It somehow was more in tune with me than that other medium. Even though ultimately what I was doing was still the same, the format was just right for me. I'm sure I'm not alone.